I'm Mia Hunt, editor of Global Government Forum, the publishing, events and research business serving civil servants around the world. Welcome to today's webinar, in which we'll examine how line managers, senior executives and HR functions can realise the potential and sidestep the pitfalls of managing a distributed workforce. This webinar is run in association with enterprise software provider Unit 4, and we have 5 panellists today. Alicia de la Rosa Bala, Chair of the Philippines Civil Service Commission, Michael Keenan, Deputy Minister of Transport Canada, Lisa Dodman, Chief People Officer at Unit 4, Kate Guthrie, Smarter Working Programme Director and Deputy Director of Workplace Experience at the UK's Government Property Agency, and Anthony Gatt, Permanent Secretary, Ministry for Energy and Water Management, Malta, who also heads up a working group on remote working across government. Before we start, I have a couple of housekeeping notes, just to let you know that the webinar is being recorded in part so that we can produce an article for publication on Global Government Forum. We'll email everyone with a link to the recording and the write-up after the event. Now, we set aside a good chunk of time to answer your questions after the 5 presentations. So please do click on the Q&A box at the foot of the Zoom window and type any questions you have in there. I'll keep an eye on that and we'll get through as many as we can at the end. So that's all from me for now. We'll go now to our first presentation from Alicia, who has very kindly joined us at 10:30 her time. Over to you, Alicia.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and assalamualaikum. The Civil Service Commission is a constitutional body which serves as the central human resource organization of the Philippine government. And we set policies and standards for human resource management and development of the entire country, which is comprised of 1.7 million workers in government from different government agencies, from national, local, state universities and colleges, including government-owned or controlled corporations with original charters. When the President signed Proclamation 929 last March 16, 2020, the Civil Service Commission issued immediately 5 alternative work arrangements for government to adopt. This includes 1, work from home. Second is skeleton or the skeletal workforce, which allows limited number of staff, specifically those who are delivering frontline service services. The third is what we call compressed work week. So instead of 5-day work in a week, it became 4 days a week. And then the other modality is what we call the staggered work schedule. That is applicable to government agencies observing the 24/7 shift or the flexible working arrangements. And then the 5th, government agencies are allowed to have a combination, any of the 4 that I have mentioned earlier. But because of the pandemic and the quarantine measures, especially when the President issued the proclamation, as I've said, declaring a state of calamity throughout the Philippines because of COVID-19 pandemic and stricter quarantine measures to prevent the spread of the disease, work from home became the norm of most of government agencies, with the medical practitioners, social workers, and the like are only allowed to report for work. While we have already relaxed some of our quarantine protocols, but still, there are still vulnerable groups that are encouraged to stay at home, especially those who have comorbidities and immunodeficiency, as well as those who are above 60 years old and below 21 years old. And then to ensure the smooth facilitation of the implementation of the work from home, government heads are encouraged to make sure that 1, The employees are given tasks to be performed to implement to the extent possible, such as policy work, research, program, and preparation of reports, among others. Second, those who are working at home are available for consultation or for meetings through virtual meetings during work hours. And then employees have access to appropriate equipment and facilities such as laptop, internet connectivity, fax machines, um, telephones, and cell phones. And then we wanted also to ensure that appropriate measures are in place to ensure protection of data used and processed by the employees pursuant to our Data Privacy Act. And then we also ensure that the confidentiality and proprietary of information are protected and secured at all times. Of course, working from home does have its own challenges. And this was supported by a study conducted by one of our Development Academy of the Philippines, which revealed that while government workers have been more productive, but they are also encountering internet connectivity challenges as well as additional personal costs to increase, the data plan and connectivity. And the survey also revealed that organization cultures such as high levels of trust and support, good communication system, and collaboration play pivotal role in employees' productivity during the strict quarantine measures. And how does government agencies monitor performance, and what are the support mechanisms? Agency heads are allowed to come up with their own monitoring schemes to ensure that employees who are working at home are able to deliver what is expected of them. And they either submit a daily or a weekly report based on what they have agreed upon to work on during the period. And then what are the support mechanisms that have been in place? One, agency heads are encouraged to provide health and psychosocial interventions such as stress debriefing. Second, reimbursements of reasonable expenses incurred during the period. And then other monetary and other forms of incentives subject to accounting and auditing rules and regulations and availability of funds. It is also worth mentioning that during the pandemic, the Civil Service Commission collaboratively worked with the health and labor departments to issue guidelines on occupational safety and health standards for the public sector. To support this, the Civil Service Commission issued guidelines on the development of mental health programs for the public sector. Likewise, we also partnered with the health department, non-government organizations, professional groups, and universities to provide access to their hotlines for government employees to contact when it comes to mental health issues or concerns. With these policies in place, it is our hope that our employees are provided with safe working environments and are given adequate support for physical, emotional, and mental well-being, especially when faced with extraordinary challenges that we are facing today. We admit that at this point, we are still very much learning through our own experiences, and we expect a lot of adjustments along the way. The COVID-19 pandemic has clearly changed the way we do things, and we expect that more will come in the next months or years to come as we transition and learn to navigate through the so-called new normal, because we wanted to ensure that we build a better normal that is sustainable beyond the pandemic. So thank you for sharing with you the experience of the Philippine government through the Civil Service Commission as the central human resource agency of the government.
Thank you very much for that, Alicia. We'll go now to our second presentation from Kate.
Thanks, Mia. Good afternoon, good evening, and again, as Alicia said, thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today for a few moments really around the UK government and our response and the approach that we took to distributed working as a response of COVID-19, but also our wider programmes that we've got in place to support what we call smarter working, which I'll talk about in a moment. So I'm Kate Guthrie. I'm one of the Deputy Directors at the UK Government Property Agency, the GPA, and we're an executive agency of the Cabinet Office. Mia, if you could just, or Maria, jump on to the next slide, please. So just a little bit about GPA. We're a very new organisation. We've only been in place for around about 2 years. And we're quite small at the moment, so less than 200 people, but with quite a fast, I guess, expansion rate, and with a really big ambition around creating great places to work for civil servants. We provide strategic property advice. We manage the government's property assets, so offices and warehouses. We act as landlord for government departments. We provide workplace services, and we deliver government hubs. So you might be asking yourself, why is a property organisation involved in a topic and an agenda that's all about people? Well, I guess we're really all about people. We provide property, but it's all about people being able to give their best in our workplaces, whether that's in an office or whether that's at home or in an alternative workplace. And in particular, my team is around supporting people in their ways of working so that they have real choice about where they work and that they're supported by technology, by leaders and by their teams and their behaviours. We could jump on a slide, please. So in terms of moving, I guess, to a distributed workforce, before I come on to managing a distributed workforce, we haven't started from scratch in the UK government. So COVID obviously brought a need to accelerate the need for people to be at home, and many thousands more than we probably were ever expecting to work from home. But we certainly weren't starting from scratch. So in 2018, we established a smarter working programme, and we included in the UK government estate strategy a commitment for all 42 government departments to become smarter working mature by the end of 2022. What do we mean by smarter working? For us, it's, as I said, people being able to make the right choice about where, when and how they work, with all the enablers there to support them. And this meant that tens of thousands of civil servants already had the right technology. They already had devices that enabled them to work wherever and whenever. They were able to access all of the right documents and the tools that they needed. Leaders were being encouraged to manage via trust, and Alicia picked up on trust and support in her presentation. And this has been really key for us. Policies were already in place to support informal home working, and separate HR policies and processes were in place or are in place for those more formal home workers. Toolkits, products, learning and development was already established through our Smarter Working programme, and although departments were at different levels of maturity, some without laptops, some working fantastically from any location, we did already have many of the things in place. That meant that our transition to COVID ways of working was in the main fairly smooth. There was obviously a need to suddenly supply people without remote devices with something that they could work on. There was a need to look at some of the policies, the HR guidance around sort of expenses. And there was a need to change and focus some of our toolkit guidance and products that we were making available to support those people that perhaps never worked from home. We also had to really recognise that not everybody within the UK government and civil service is able to work from home or remotely. We've got prison guards, we've got people in job centres that are dealing with face-to-face customers, and it just wasn't appropriate for those to be able to work from home. So people have had to think really hard around how they engage in a sort of hybrid environment where there's people at home in home offices, on dining room tables, on sofas with children and other caring responsibilities, with those that are in more perhaps normal traditional offices and ways of working. Could we go on to the next slide, please? So learning so far, and this comes both from the COVID experience, but also, as I said, our work with departments on wider, smarter working. And we've learned quite a lot. I think, like Alicia said, we have got a long way to go. There's still a lot of learning for us to take on board. But we've put our I guess, key principles into 4 key areas. This is very much our view, and there's lots of theories, and I'm sure you've been to many different webinars or read different articles around what it really means to manage remote workforces successfully. But we've put it into 4 key topics for us. So trust, again, Alicia picked up on this, fundamental really, and I don't know about those on the call, but for me, trust is always, it's a default. We provide and give trust as a default, but we all know that can be really challenging. It doesn't always work, and therefore we've provided teams, individuals and organisations with ways that they can help to grow and promote and instill trust. Things like setting your principles and your procedures. So not rules about how you're going to work as a team, but some principles, how you're going to work best, how you're going to continue to engage and communicate with one another. Connections is really critical, and there's an awful lot of work and studies around connections and how that can improve a sense of purpose and well-being, but also how important it is in team collaboration, in learning and development, in retention. So we've provided lots of advice and guidance on how teams stay connected, right down to sort of the personal, the social opportunities that teams and departments might want to take up. But a really important point there again around recognising that we're in a mixed economy. Not everybody is working at home. We have people that are working in the office and those that are working at home or in libraries or in other places. And for the future, I think we need to think around, do we want to go back to a world where 10 people are sat in an office or in a meeting room on a video conference, and the one person or 2 people that are at the other end struggling to hear and listen in? How inclusive is that? So there's been lots of guidance that we've provided around inclusive meetings, inclusive engagement. Removing the roadblocks, providing the right tools. I mentioned making sure that people have got the right technology, the right access, but also that they've got opportunities for learning and development, and that teams are thinking around the cultural side. What are the barriers to distributed working? How can you be best as and work best as a team? And then a real strong focus on delivery. Within the civil service, we've not stopped our delivery during COVID, and we've not really seen any detriment to productivity. And I think in part that's been down in many, to the people, the civil servants that are finding lots of ways, I guess, to remove process, remove hierarchies, remove sort of the amount of decision making, to really streamline processes. All of this for us, not so much in the COVID experience, but certainly in the future, is around flexibility and choice of workplace, whether it's home, near home or office. Choice of types of working areas that you can go to depending on the type of work that you're doing, and very much supported by interoperable ICT. So being able to move anywhere and still being able to connect with your colleagues, with your organisation. If we could move on, please. So our learning so far, I've touched on some of these points, but within the civil service, for those that we've been working with, more and more people are able to work from home. Productivity hasn't been negatively impacted. We've recently undertaken a survey across many parts of the civil service, and the majority of people are saying that they're still productive, they're still doing a similar role. There has been additional work because of COVID, which has increased some workloads, but actually people are just as positive, just as productive. We're working with an organisation called Leesman. I don't know if people are familiar with Leesman. But they've done surveys across around about 90,000 people in over 300 workplaces and over 60 countries. And they found in their survey that people are finding that their workplaces at home are actually supporting them and enabling them to be more productive than in their normal workplace. And when you compare their home working survey with their much broader survey. And we've just launched that same home working survey across a number of UK government departments. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the home environment is supporting productivity, not just for now, but for the future and our future transformation plans. It's certainly showing that home can be a really supportive place for concentrated work, for quiet work, for planned meetings, for reading, but perhaps the office is still really important in terms of engagement, collaboration, socialisation. Needs to be a real focus on well-being and inclusivity, ensuring that all those that are working remotely are still engaged, that there's still the same team ethos and same community, whether you are working at home, working in an office, or working anywhere else in an organisation. Clear benefits, and there are many for individuals, but as I said, it doesn't work for everybody, depending on the type of role and your own personal situation as well. So we're finding that leaders are having to have really rich conversations with individuals around their roles and around the role of their team to understand how they can best work at home, what sort of activities they might want to do at home or in a remote location, and when actually they should be going into an office. Choice and flexibility is really clear, really key, and with some really obvious statements here, but managing a distributed workforce really does take effort, really takes time. You need to build up trust with individuals, but I would say that trust should be there from the beginning. And final slide, if you could move on. So looking to the future, we are, much like Alicia said, really, we're learning from this. There's lots to do in terms of transforming the civil service. Lots to do in terms of thinking about our future ways of working, where we work, moving to hybrid models of home, near home and office. Very much a focus on building communities within workplaces, within organisations and across organisations. Focus on collaboration and connection, engagement, still enabling creativity, whether we can do that at home and in the workplace. We're still learning, I guess, on that. And also around caring for one another, being cognizant of our well-being, of our resilience, and maintaining levels of engagement, whether somebody is in an office or working remotely. And as I said, overall, really looking at how we can learn from this experience, build on the smarter working programmes that were already in place to transform the civil service. And I guess our overall ambition of making great places to work for the UK civil service. And the final slide is just to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Look forward to your questions, and my email address is there if anybody is interested. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kate. Here is Unit 4's Lisa Dodman with the next presentation.
Thanks, Mia. So thanks for having me here today. I'm Lisa Dodman, Chief People Officer for Unit 4. Unit 4 is a global ERP software vendor. We have 3,000 of our own employees worldwide, 42 offices around the world, and we work with 1,500 public sector organisations. So we move to the next slide. Like so many other organisations, our journey of change came along rapidly with the rush to worldwide remote working, which was absolute. Being a software vendor, we can deploy our software remotely, and we do have a lot of employees who are remotely based, but never before had we had our entire workforce out of the office at the same time. So when we think about controlling the crisis at the very start, there were some very key things we focused on. We felt it required strong leadership, clear and regular communication, empowerment that laid the foundations for alternative ways to collaborate, and a stronger need than ever before for empathy and trust. And that's already come up on the first two presentations. It's really key for us. During that journey, we focused on a programmatic approach to the mental, physical and social well-being of our people. We called it Fit for You, and we introduced a series of activities, fitness classes, meditation sessions online, coffee breaks, which were fixed in people's diaries. We introduced Unit 4 Kids, a program of activities for the children of our workforce, because we recognised that we were in tough times. Employees were having to be employees, parents and teachers all at the same time. So we wanted to provide activities to keep the children occupied. We sent resilience gifts around the world. 3,000 employees received plants, bringing nature into their home environment, recognising that some of our employees were at home on their own, were living in confined spaces, and in some countries that have gone on for a long time. We also introduced a STEPS challenge app to keep people fit, but also to encourage team solidarity, and that's continued to be a really, really positive impact. When you think about some of the more challenging aspects that this remote working has driven, the loneliness aspect was a big part of our journey, and the kind of Groundhog Day, the monotony that people were facing. Our employee assistance program globally was really, really important to be reinforced, because people just might need someone to talk to, a confidential service. We provided flexible working options to our employees who were trying to be teachers as well as parents, and we reduced working hours with no financial impact for those living with key workers, and they were fundamental for us. But in addition, we are a business, we needed to maintain our budgets, and they continue to be key for our survival. But we quickly built a waterfall of events that would act as a barrier to fulfill our commitment that we made to our employees: no job losses during COVID. So that meant we looked at various different levels of defence, offensive and defensive strategies to keep our business safe and keep our people safe. That included, obviously, no travel. We spent a lot of money on travel every single year. And when you analysed all of that travel, there were travel opportunities taking place which didn't need to continue. We didn't need to be face-to-face, and we will reduce our travel by 50% moving forward. We reduced our vacancies, reviewed our contractor spend, suspended salary review processes, cleared holiday balance backlog in some of the countries where that was a legal requirement to take those days, reviewed our real estate portfolio, and most importantly, we, like every other organisation, had a number of people whose roles were impacted by the fact that they couldn't be in the office. Facility staff, for example. Recruitment was reducing. We provided a redeployment service, an internal recruitment agency, to redeploy them to functions that were busy. So recruiters went into business development, and we made sure there was a career planning activity taking place around it. So those employees didn't feel they were being forced to do something different, more that they were gaining skills which we could demonstrate to them that they could bring back into the role that they were doing before. So it was a service provision they were providing to help the rest of the business. And all of these steps have been really, really important to ensure we protect our people. But that journey has driven a sense of community, acceleration in agility and productivity, and has focused us on what we call the better normal, where we put people first, which is one of our values, by creating a freedom of choice model, and that's come up as well. How have we done that? Our first step was actually back in 2019, when we introduced a work-life balance policy, which we've been rolling out across the business. No cap on holiday. Take the leave you need when you need it. Our next step is an environment that you can perform best in, greater personal flexibility. Throw away the policies, you choose what works best for you. We move to the next slide. There are 4 key areas I think that we've had as learning points and moments of consideration. The first is that we sought to see the positive in the crisis. We had productivity gains, 12% increase in R&D, creativity, insights. And the biggest thing for us is we continue to listen to our people through the power of Inturo, which is our engagement tool, through to surveying our people in terms of the choices that they wanted to make about their return, and how we supported them through their management chains. Trust and empathy are key components. But it was also about changing that mindset, taking us on the journey of positive change for the future rather than continuing to look backwards. We also, as a result of surveying our employees, established that over 50% did not want to return. That has caused us to move to a phased office opening. So we will open our offices phased basis worldwide up to the end of September on a 30% capacity. We introduced a booking tool so employees can book in advance, while still absolutely reinforcing this belief that working from home is absolutely an acceptable norm practice for us moving forward. But we also made sure that through that booking tool, we could focus on the vulnerable that really needed to be in the office spaces of the future. Whilst going through all of this, one thing that's key is that we've needed to equip our managers to deal with the unknown. There's nobody that came along and suddenly had years of experience of dealing with COVID-19. It was new to all of us. So we have continued with our leadership development programs that we'd started last year. We've continued to roll them out. We've provided mentoring support. We are currently rolling out mental health awareness workshops for our managers so that they can support their employees in the best possible way. We introduced a manager toolkit, an employee people portal. We've carried out COVID care calls, weekly support for our managers for those moments when something happens and they need to reach out and get some support. And as I mentioned, Intuo, our employee engagement tool, we've used for weekly pulsing. It's driven by app technology and it's regular pulsing to check on the health and well-being and the happiness of our employees. And this tool we've given free to our customers during times of COVID. We've used it to test resilience and, as I said, empathy, which have been key for our cultural change as well as our people experience journey. And then lastly, when you think about the remote journey, trust is absolutely driving everything that we do like never before. Collaboration spaces are what we're looking towards for the future. No fixed desks, giving freedom, choices. Innovation has no barriers, but in equal measure, the voice of the people has no barriers either. And engagement acceleration is where we need to be for the future. So moving on to the next slide. I mentioned about engagement pulsing. Gone are the days of a survey one time a year, and often it will be assessing activities of the past. We do weekly pulsing through app technology. It's not one time a year. We use the percentage scoring to track against bonus payments. We give the power of the voice to our people. Where we have low scoring, because that happens, we provide nurturing focus for those managers that the assessments may be low. We focus on agility and responsiveness and our three key themes: trust, empathy, and freedom. And then finally, to my last slide, as it happens, at the start of COVID, we hired a global head of workspace. We were already on our journey of change. The vision of the future is just reinforced by the positive focus on this crisis. There are no barriers. Collaboration spaces to enable growth and opportunity for our people. And that's our next destination. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Michael Keenan, over to you.
Thanks. It's great to be here and really appreciate hearing these different experiences. Let me start with the first slide on the, actually, we've got to do something. Give me 50 seconds here with the go one. Yeah, there we go. Excellent. So I'm the Deputy Minister of Transport Canada. It's the national transportation policy and regulatory body for Canada. We have about 6,000 employees, and half of them are in the national capital. The other half are spread around the four corners of a very large country and 5.5 time zones. We've had, like everybody, a very acute emergency-like experience with remote work, and it has been actually quite positive. But that positive experience in the fateful weekend in mid-March, where we decided that we would basically close all our 110 offices in the country and work remotely, was the product of about 2 years of development of a capacity to work digitally. And we had already 2 years ago launched on this agenda to work digitally as part of the key strategy for how we could provide better service to Canadians in making sure their transportation system's safe, green, and efficient. So when we actually got to, if you go to the next slide, if we got to the The fateful weekend, we're like everybody else on a Friday, we decided that we would close the office and move online. We basically had a series of infrastructure that was in place. We had already expanded our bandwidth. We had already made tablets or portable computers the standard for all employees, and we cut the cord. We were well advanced in getting rid of all of our landlines and having all employees run on smartphones. And that this was a general direction across the entire government of Canada, but it's one that Transport Canada had moved forward more forcefully on for a variety of specific reasons. And I think the critical thing to managing, and so we didn't know what would happen. We started up on the next Monday morning, and lo and behold, with a few kinks, we had about 90% of our workforce working remotely. We had a small number of people still we had 3 or 4% still working at the work site because they had critical functions that could only be done at the work site. You can't maintain an airplane from your home. You have to be in an airplane hangar. And then we sort of went on and managed through the first 4 months. So the tools are a big part, and everybody has a different starting place for the tools, but we found that the basic infrastructure was key. As well, the sort of ensuring that employees are set up at home, and we've slowly but surely worked out a policy that is becoming fairly common in the Government of Canada to provide a minimal amount of support for employees to set up a home office if they're continuing to work online. The collaboration tools are key. I think we have several thousand meetings a day held on MS Teams and different collaboration tools. If you don't have them, you can't work remotely. After you get past the tools, and because we'd made investments in tools, we had a pretty good experience getting going working remotely. You have the majority of 6,000 people across the country. The real issue is not technical, it's management. It's communication and engagement to avoid isolation. A whole bunch of people who are used to the social network of an office are now at home, sometimes in small places, sometimes living alone, sometimes with kids who aren't going to school. And so the next slide, as it indicates, we carried out a really strong effort and put a lot of energy onto making sure that every manager was connecting to their employees individually and together every week. And there's group meetings. We had communications from me to all staff every week and cascading down. And as a result, I think we were able to mitigate the biggest risk, which is employees feeling isolated. We did a survey a few weeks ago of the majority of employees, next slide, and actually found very positive, and for us, surprisingly positive response, given the stress and the urgency of the situation and the difficult personal circumstances. And interestingly, we found that there was a strong preference on a lot of our employees of continuing to work home and a concern about being pulled back to the office too fast. So we've started a reintegration to our offices, but at a very limited number to ensure social distancing. As a result, next slide, we are working towards, is that the last slide? That is the last slide. Sorry, I'll leave it there. As a result, we're at a period where we found a way to, in the first 4 months, to make this work. We've been pleased to see that, like others, our productivity is the same or higher with everybody working from home, and our ministry has had incredible productivity on a whole range of issues in responding to COVID. Issues are really now sustaining this, and fundamentally, working remotely is less about the technology and much more about how to manage. We have a very complex and complicated work environment with many different specialists. We are in a unionized environment, so our bargaining agents are partners in managing all of this and working through the understandings of how we will work with many people working at home for some time. And how we sustain engagement, how we sustain connectedness, how we manage people, performance, how we ensure that all of the things that are implicit in the daily social connectivity of in a physical workplace are covered is our big focus. We're geared to maximizing digital and remote work for some time. We have to figure this out as we go, but we're putting incredible effort into really, I would say, the social aspects of managing and figuring out how, and reworking all the assumptions about how to manage teams, all the assumptions about how teams work, because distance is no longer a factor. To make this work on an ongoing basis, I don't think any of us have quite figured out how to move an organization from a physical-based location to one where for the time being, perhaps for a long time, a lot of employees are working remotely, but we are working it through. The last thing I would say is that we focus a lot on remote work, and it's really important, and managing workers remotely, but ultimately it's about service. It's about service to our own employees. Large organizations provide there's a lot of internal services that are provided. And we have 600 service lines to industry and the public. And the big issue in making remote work a grand success is re-engineering and reconceiving of all of our service so it works remotely. You can't have a workforce working remotely if you've got a legacy analog direct service. So we are mapping in real time all of our service offerings, and the success of remote work is intrinsically tied to our ability to reinvent how we deliver service. The good news is the emergency gives us a great opportunity to accelerate changes and accomplish in a matter of months what would normally take years in reinventing large national institutions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Michael. We'll go now to our last presentation before we move on to the Q&A session. Anthony.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. I'm Anthony Gatt. I'm the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry for Energy in Malta, which is one of the 13 ministries in Malta that forms the Malta Public Service. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share our experiences and knowledge that we have managed to gain so far. I would also like to say at the beginning of my presentation that the Malta Public Service in Malta is by far the major employer, employing over 30,000 employees across all sectors. So here, when we're discussing the transition to remote working, it's in Malta, it's the major employer that is looking at this modern way of doing work. The organization in itself, by means of introduction, if I may, the organization in itself is highly bureaucratic. This means that the transition is even more difficult because we're accustomed to written rules, to guidelines and procedures that are written in what we call it is the Public Service Management Code, where in reality puts managers and employers in a very straitjacket when it comes to taking certain decisions. Therefore, to move towards remote working was not an easy decision. Certainly, it's going to be a very, very difficult challenge that we're all in for it. I'm proud, obviously, to say that my ministry has been selected as the lead ministry in this initiative in Malta to go for remote working. We're tasked with this responsibility to see how it could best be introduced within these structures, which I've mentioned earlier. what is actually required to make it as effective as possible, and maybe also identify what is actually required to make it happen. And also here I want to be very clear that the idea to introduce remote working within the Malta Public Service was not entertained by the COVID pandemic. In fact, we've been working to go for this transition now since summer 2019. Obviously, the COVID situation, then we had to increase the pace, but certainly it wasn't the COVID pandemic that entertained us to go for this challenge. The main aim of this project was to increase our employees' work-life balance, as we believe that through the benefits of remote working, employees can deliver more effectively while enhancing their work-life balance. Obviously, in itself, this will bring about huge benefits for the organization with regard, for example, to employee retention. Nowadays, I have employees working from other countries. Obviously, if it wasn't for remote working, this wouldn't have been possible, and probably they would have resigned. Something else, obviously, remote organizations can provide a competitive edge over their competitors. So basically, if you could maybe move backwards, sorry, but this is all about, in our opinion, and with the knowledge we gained so far, it's all about culture change. We have to invest in our own knowledge, and we have to challenge the status quo. What has worked so far may not necessarily work in the future. We had, for example, departments that have been there for years, for example, taking note of the attendances of our employees. We have removed those ideas. We want to create agile organizations, and as as the other panelists have also said earlier, we have to build an organization on trust and results. If you could move maybe to the next slide, please. So obviously this will lead us to fear of the unknown, of the challenges that we have to face. And one of the most important issues that we had to challenge is to enhance communication within the organization. Although we had all employees before working from an office setup, it didn't mean that all employees were aware of why they were working within our organization, for example. They didn't share the values of our organization. And another major challenge which we had to face, and we're still facing actually, is to digitize all the processes as much and as far as possible. It is important to question each and every paper-based process. Why should this process be kept on a paper-based process? Why? And this is something that we have invested in heavily as a ministry, and proudly enough, I would say that we're the most advanced ministry with regards to technology in Malta. And for example, one of the most difficult challenges that we had to face was actually to remove the physical files, for example, that have been there for, I don't know, 50 or 60 years. To change something like that and to go to an electronic means of filing, digital filing, actually wasn't easy, and was very difficult to convince employees to go digital. I must say that at the beginning, when had, as I said before, in summer, I forgot the exact date, but it was in summer 2019 when I first mentioned remote working to my fellow managers. I remember the backlash that I got from my colleagues at that time. But when we managed to explain, and I did all that was possible within my control to explain the benefits, they're now obviously on my side, and they're mentoring our employees to be prepared for this change. If we could move maybe to the last slide, we're tackling. Sorry, I forgot. Sorry, the previous one. So as I said earlier, we're trying to build this organization, our organization, onto important pillars. This has been mentioned earlier by the other panelists as well. We want to build an organization that relies on our employees' trust. We have to build two-way trust. If we lose trust, remote working will not work, because managing people from remote locations is not as managing people within an office setup. So the first important pillar is obviously trust. Trust is something that you work hard to build it, and you can lose it overnight. So this is something that managers have to keep focused on 24/7. If we could move to the next slide, please. The second important pillar is results. We have to change the culture change that I've mentioned earlier, the organization from a bureaucratic organization, from keeping attendances, from monitoring people, what they're doing between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. on a daily basis. We have to go for a results-oriented organization. I want A, B, and C. I want A, B, and C to get done by the end of, for example, the end of this week, and all I should be after is to see that what the tasks that I've communicated to my employees are communicated in time and of the desired standard. Obviously, this will require training, because, as I said, it's also from a management perspective is something new, and this is something which I would like to say here. This transition, we've noticed that the most important change will actually affect and impact the management layer rather than the employees themselves. So the greatest challenge would be for the managers rather than for the employees. If we could move for the last slide, we're tackling the transition on three separate working groups. The first group actually consists of a group of professionals, which includes motivators, psychologists, which are identifying the most ideal ways how to keep employees together, because sometimes from the outset it might seem that could be 100% beneficial for employees, but when you dig deep, one will easily identify that actually it might create certain problems and issues for employees. We've noticed this, for example, during the COVID period. It was a challenge for us as managers to try to keep our employees motivated and not let them fall apart. So that is something that we're tackling directly, not to lose any employee while going for remote working. The second group, which consists of HR managers, for example, industrial relations experts, etc., is specifically tasked with the responsibility to change the necessary guidelines, rules, which I've mentioned earlier, to make the organization adaptable for the new realities of remote working. Organizations like ours had many rigid rules. We had to go through this change also to challenge those rules and make them adaptable for remote working. The last but not least group is the IT preparedness working group. This, because I've seen also that there were some questions with regards to IT. Obviously, we want to create a mobile working force. The mobility of our working force is a must. And to tackle this, just to mention two examples. First of all, we're providing all our employees with high-end laptops that could easily allow them to move from one office to another, from home, from the remote working hubs that we're setting up, etc. So point number one, provide your employees with high-end laptops. Secondly, because obviously laptops nowadays need connections, mobile connections, we're going to provide all our employees with 4G connections through mobile devices. We've gone for this option because it is much easier for us to control and secure mobile devices, and we'll be giving this opportunity for our employees to connect their laptops to these mobile devices that will be provided by the government, in our case, with unrestricted, unlimited 4G connection. And obviously this will allow our employees to work from anywhere around the globe, just like they've been doing so far from their office. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity, and obviously I'm here maybe to answer any questions that might arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Anthony. Okay, so thank you for to all of our panelists for those insightful presentations. We've now got some time for questions. We got quite a few in advance and a few more in during the session as well, so that's great. Thank you to those that have sent in questions so far. Just a reminder that the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom window, you can type your questions in there. So we've had quite a few questions about maintaining team spirit. And this question comes from a supervisor in a state government in Michigan. She says that she and her team had worked in the same office for years and often bounced ideas off each other without having to schedule a meeting. And that communication is what made her team so strong. So she asked, how can she get that back and maintain a tight-knit team when working remotely? So who would like to answer that one? To go over to you, Kate.
Yep, sure. So interestingly as well, sort of share in some ways your experiences, and I lead a very mixed team, I would say, of people that are dotted all over the UK, but with some that also regularly go into a workplace as well, so a real mix of ways of working. So I think we've approached it from two different angles. One is around from a kind of business delivery perspective in terms of sort of team cohesion, and the other is much more from a social sort of and spirit, that sort of side of things. So some of the things that we've done in terms of that team connection in terms of what we're delivering is we had clear priorities before, but I don't think we ever quite set expectations on one another as a team, how we want to work together, how we're going to do it, how we're going to talk to one another, and just simple things. We need to do quite a lot of sort of idea generation. We've found some really useful tools online that are effectively like using post-it notes in a room, but you're doing it digitally, and it's instant. You're sharing it. It's instant access to one another while we're talking to one another over our laptop. And we found that sort of idea generation has been fantastic. We make a lot of use of our tools, sort of instant messenger, different types of technology to very quickly, send each other ideas, and we're encouraging ideas all of the time. We've done quite a lot of more social things, I would say, as well. And I think that's been really important for us. One of the big, I think, positives of this situation is everybody's become more informal. We've started to see each other's houses, we've started to see each other's children and things in the background, and we've tried to actually build a much more informal way of working. So we've had sort of quizzes, we've had pub evenings, we've done a virtual walk of the British coast, coast to coast, things like that, to just try and generate, I guess, that team ethos, but things you can do at home. Coffee chats with someone in the team that you wouldn't normally do. A community sort of connection board for posting those little things that you might say when you bump into somebody in the office, but a virtual sort of space for community chats, for posting recipes, for sort of all sorts of different things that you would normally do at home. We also share on a Friday what were you doing for the weekend? You know, what family are you meeting? What friends? How are you in? You know, what are you doing in your social life? I guess, and I think that's really helped from that sort of bonding perspective that again you would normally have in the office. But yeah, from a business perspective, you know, clear. We all agreed how we want to work. We all agreed a sort of charter, our principles. We all agreed when we would contact you and when we wouldn't. I think that's really important for sort of team spirit, is thinking around, you know, if I've got children, if I've got homeschooling, if I've got caring responsibilities, actually there's times when I need a bit of a break in work, and being honest with my team around, you know, avoid sort of contact at this time, but just really open, really honest, really informal communication, and making use of all the tools that are available.
Yeah, thank you. Those sort of non-work activities, Lisa, you mentioned that at Unit 4 you brought in quite a lot of things like that as well. And we got a question in about, you know, how important fun non-work activities are in boosting morale, and whether you have any tips for introducing those kinds of things that can be done remotely. So I don't know whether, Lisa, you have anything to add on that point.
I think the necessity for having that kind of fun aspect became more and more needed as COVID went on, and you know, some of our teams have been in lockdown for a lot longer, and so it becomes a bit of a pressure cooker. So if you don't give that kind of sense of fun, so we had crazy hat day, we use Microsoft Teams, so we had crazy hat meetings, pajama meetings in my teams. We saw lots of different ways to connect and make it fun. Coffee breaks online with different teams, because I think it's the lack of connection that people are missing. And my team is global, so you know, even doing a drinks evening doesn't become a drinks evening for everyone, because it might be late afternoon in the UK, but my team in Singapore, it's late in the evening in the US, where they're just starting. One of the things that I have introduced, as we're coming to the point that we are, is a point of slowdown for my team. So Friday afternoons is now low touch email only, because being on video all the time, I think we have to recognize it's even more draining than just being in a face-to-face meeting. And you get to the end of the week, you might have had 10, 15 calls of whatever fun capacity you have in that. You have to allow people that sense of being able to slow down, being able to reflect and kind of consider the week, however fun or hectically filled it's been. People are starting to see the impact, and I think all of those things are really important, as well as the fun things, which obviously play a part too.
Yeah. We had another question in from Anne. She says, do you have any advice around managing teams in which some people can work from home and some people can't because their role doesn't allow it? It can seem unfair that some staff have the choice when it's not possible for others. Michael, I don't know whether you'd like to answer that one.
Sure. Sorry about the background noise. Something is printing. I have a common printer for 2 home offices. I think that's a big issue, and large complex organizations face that because there's different kinds of employees. And we've managed in this process people who want to and can and are able to personally, and because of their job, work from home. and some that can't work from home. And we would split those into ones that we had to work and others that we just put on a pause. However, as we go forward, the way we manage this is a very structured dialogue between every manager and every employee in terms of their work and their personal family situation to reconcile the two. And employees who actually need, for a personal reason, to work in the office, for some reason it's not suitable to work from home, they become a top priority for integrating back into the office. Now, we started to open up the office for a small number of employees, and we prioritize them based on those whose job function cannot be done remotely, and that's a tiny minority in our department, and those who, for personal reasons, need working remotely is not suitable. And we're in the middle of that right now. We're fairly confident we can reconcile those two with the amount of spaces we have available back in the work site. That will still leave the vast majority working productively from home.
Great, thank you. Alicia, do you want to come in on that one?
Yes, thank you. Well, in the Philippines, I think one of the key strategies to make sure that the risk strategy communication would be made available to everyone, meaning we have to inform them about the rationale why some people are allowed to work at home and why people have to work, especially for those who are directly providing critical services like in the hospitals or in the health facilities. And to support this so that they won't feel that they are, it's not fair for them, no less than the president has approved the grant of financial assistance to include risk allowances for medical employees. And then another one is the hazard pay for those who are actually reporting during the quarantine. And then on top of it all, our government, for those who have contracted the disease, they are provided with 100,000 pesos, or that's about what? It's almost like $20,000 or something. And then for those who would die due to COVID-19, the family stands to get 1 million pesos. And then our government service insurance system, the one that takes care of government employees, they're also offering 500,000 pesos. And on top of it all, our Philippine health insurance, there's a package for that covers their hospitalization, medical fees, including the professional fees that would support their recovery when they are hospitalized. So I think these are one, you have to explain to them that not all are expected to work at home. Like as I mentioned, if you are delivering the basic services to the public, we cannot help but they have to be there. But we are not letting them on their own. The government is there to support them. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there's even a move in Congress that there is a legislation that would already provide for a transition, adopting this alternative work arrangement that the Commission has already proposed as the way to go for during or after, post-pandemic.
Mm-hmm. All right, interesting. Just having a look through now. We had a question in from a policy advisor in New Zealand's Treasury. And Anthony, I'll direct this one at you. He says government policy agencies have adapted well to the challenges of remote working in the short term, but longer term there may be specific challenges such as onboarding, training, development and socialising new and near staff in a remote work environment. How can this be done successfully?
Yes, obviously, it is, sorry, I heard someone else.
Should we go to you first, Anthony, and then we can
Yes.
go back to Alicia?
Okay, yes, obviously that is one of the main challenges, for example, when recruiting new employees, but that is why in my presentation I've mentioned that we're preparing a set of guidelines to guide managers when working under remote working arrangements. Obviously, we have to keep in mind communication between our employees. And for example, one of the initiatives that we're taking is that we're making it a point that at least once a week, all employees will meet face-to-face at one of our remote working hubs. That is something that we have to keep. These all these fragmented challenges, which you have just mentioned, are obviously a challenge, but I'm sure that with the right direction, we can yes, overcome.
Alicia, did you want to add to that one?
Yeah. In the case of the Civil Service Commission as an agency, we while we are transitioning, we're moving towards transitioning to the new normal. We have already prepared what we call the Business Recovery Action Plan, because we want to ensure that the operations of the Commission should move forward with the different challenges ahead of us. So we have to revisit our plans for the year, within the year, and make some adjustments. And we wanted to focus more on the transitioning to digital platform in our service delivery. For example, like the conduct of learning and development opportunities for the employees in government, because we want to ensure that work does not stop. So we have already started offering new discussions about about alternative work arrangements, and then moving on to other topics that would support those working at home, so that they can also feel that they are being supported. And one of which is the health and wellness, that we will be, this is important because we saw a lot of concerns coming from the public sector that at some points, being cooped up at home, and you've been used to reporting every day to the office, and then all of a sudden you find yourselves confined at home, and that the challenge of balancing the work, and then you can't help, because when you're at home, you have to do some household responsibilities too, especially when the employees have small children to attend to. So I think this is one of the things that we have done in the commission, and there are more other things that we have lined up for the bureaucracy, where they can participate, and we're making it more accessible and even more affordable, because we believe that this is the service that we can do to our people, so that they can be more prepared to address and adjust to the new normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mia, I just wonder if I can just add as well. I think for us in the UK government, obviously we're in the midst of the pandemic, and we've still got most people working from home if they can. I think for the future, though, I think it's really important, for organisations to be able to think around, well, what activity can be maintained and continue to be done at home, but actually there's still a role for the workplace, and some of the activities in that question in the future might still be done best in the workplace. And I think understanding that and talking to individuals, and from the surveys that we're going to be doing to get to the bottom of, well, actually, how well supported have you been at home? What activities can you continue to do? But what things might you want to go back into an office if it's safe to do so? Whether that's close to your home in a regional sort of hub or somewhere else, and therefore what facilities should we provide in offices to help people collaborate and build communities, I think is going to be a really important part of sort of the way people work, not just distributed, but the whole package, I guess, of working in an office and remotely.
Right, we're nearing the end of our time together now, but I'll ask another 1 or 2 questions, I think, get those in quickly. We have one that's come in from Michael. He says that many of the panelists implied that success of remote working requires strong leadership. Please provide 1 or 2 characteristics of a strong leader. And he also asks, and how are the leaders themselves being engaged? Michael, can I come to you on that one?
Sure. This involves at its heart a reimagining of how people work and how groups of people in companies or institutions work, and it requires leadership to kind of drive that reimagining process. And so I think it's at several levels. One is just the constant communicating about both the necessity and the opportunity from the change. And I think that is one that everybody's described here, and all leaders have to do to kind of drive this change, because it becomes a core change management challenge. I think the second is demonstrating results along the way, because these are enormous changes, and demonstrating these small results, keeping in focus the human factor and the human connectivity and the fact that people are social animals, and modeling and demonstrating the behavior. So I have, since March, I have worked 7 days a week, and probably, and in an average month, I actually go to the office once for some particular issue. I haven't done for my personal banking, I had to make a wet signature for personal banking, and it felt strange because in the hundreds of authorizations and legal authorizations and decisions, it's the first one where I had actually picked up a pen and signed my name. It was for personal banking. And so when you do that, and all of your interaction with your teams is digital and remote, and you're making it work, then they find a way to make it work. But I would say the last thing is, every meeting or every call with one of my direct reports, and there's about 20 of them, it starts out with how you're doing. And I think that successful organizations have been able to emulate that throughout the chain. So everybody's checking in on everybody on a human level, and just having that human discussion before they launch into the work of them.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Lisa.
can I just add to that? Because I agree with the comments Michael has made. I would just add a couple of things. Teams follow the example they're set. So leaders need to lead by example, and they need to do what they say they will. So in times of COVID, when people are stuck at home, if their leaders are constantly working 24 hours a day, they'll follow that leader. And then you start to see signs and behaviors in different ways. And we all are guilty of working longer because it's easy to do that, because you're at home and there's nothing else to do, so let's work. But I think we have an obligation to make sure there's moments of downtime for our people, because of this constant kind of working at home fatigue that I think people are getting in. And the other point that I think is really important is turning trust on its head, because it's very easy to assume people are not doing the right thing, and what we should be doing is turning it upside down and assuming they are. If there are people that are not being productive, then that's a different thing, and you deal with that separately. But I think we have to, moving forward into this new better, where everything is different, and there's an opportunity to benefit from that for everyone, we have to trust and lead with we know you're going to do the very best that you can. And I think they're two very strong leadership requirements.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right, so yeah, nearly out of time. One more question. I'll ask all of you in turn, and if you could keep your answers fairly short, that would be great. COVID-19 has driven major changes in working practices. What do you think working practices might look like in 5 or 10 years' time in your organisation, and how will they continue to evolve? So Kate, I'll come to you first.
Thanks, less time to think about the answer. So I think we're already on that journey. In all honesty, particularly in the UK government, I think we will see a move from roles within London, within Whitehall, and see many of those roles move out to regions. I think there will be far greater choice around, and I think picking up on other points, people will be trusted to make the choice themselves about where and when they work. I think we'll perhaps see across government much closer sort of co-working or cross-government working. I think this situation has shown that we perhaps do need to be a bit more resilient in how we work, how we work across government, how we share. And I also think things will be a lot more informal. We've kind of got rid of hierarchies in this situation. We're going to the decision maker straight away. We're cutting out sort of some of the red tape. People at all sorts of grades are involved in really significant decisions. And as I said, we're seeing each other's houses, we're seeing each other's children, we're socialising in a different way. So I think we'll move towards a much more informal way of working.
Anthony, I'll come to you next.
Sorry, Mia, was that me?
We will come to you. Yes.
Okay, sorry. So I agree with the comments Kate has made. I think for us it will be freedom to work how you want, where you work best, and to be who you want to be. And I think our office spaces will be those areas to nurture creativity in the way you want to be.
Right, great, thank you. Anthony.
Sorry, hi. You've said 5 to 10 years. I would say 5 to 7 months rather than 5 to 10 years, because I'm looking forward to have a remote working workforce, which is very agile, adaptable, effective and efficient, increasing efficiency in the coming months, and obviously with all the benefits that I've mentioned before. With all the abilities to retain more talent within the organization, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia.
One, I think there will be more co-creation of policies, programs between and among government agencies, and to work as one, to include legislative, executive, and local government units, and the participation of the non-government organizations and the private sector. Second is the flexible work arrangements, because the way to go is really to move towards digital service delivery, access by the stakeholders 24/7. And then third, there will be more focus on people first, as mentioned, because after all, what makes the new normal to become better is for everyone to work together as one, and there's a common mission to serve the public. And I think that's that I can see that there will be more agility and more flexibility, even workspaces.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Michael.
So the actual way we work has leapt ahead of our practice of how we manage work, and the architecture of rules, policies, and laws that govern it. And I think in 5 years, you're going to see them converge. And I think in the public sector, we have a very complex workplace with a lot of architecture, a lot of policies, collective agreements with labor unions, etc. A lot of legislation that governs it. And all of that, I think in 5 years, will evolve to catch up to what's happening on the ground. And that will be the big change, because right now we're managing it without an architecture or model. And in 5 years, we'll have an architecture and model.
Thank you. All right, that's it. We're out of time. Thank you very much to Lisa in Unit 4, to Alicia, to Michael, to Kate, and to Anthony. And of course, to all of you in the audience. Thank you very much to everyone who sent in questions. And I'm sorry we couldn't get through all of them, but we will send those questions on to the relevant people, and hopefully they'll be able to answer them for you afterwards. We really hope that you found this webinar useful. We'll be emailing you with a link to the slides, the recording and the write-up shortly. And in the meantime, we'd like to thank all the civil servants watching for working incredibly hard to support citizens and deliver public services throughout this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.